We've had those conversations with the Ukrainians about what they need, and I know that's ongoing. And clearly helping them survive the winter is important just from on a humanitarian ground. The challenge is that Ukraine's energy grid has been diminished each year. So each year they start at a lower baseline than the year before. Now I think in Kyiv, for example, upwards of 50 to 60% of the day is spent without electrical power. And they've done a tremendous job of sort of rerouting their grid and trying to work around it. But that also means there are hours of the day where there's no water, there's no electricity. You have to schedule business and life activities around that. And that's clearly part of Russia's strategy, is to try to collapse morale within Ukraine and the will to fight. So, that's why we've been in discussions with them about defensive weapons to be able to protect their grid. And I know we've been in ongoing technical conversations about the specific equipment they need. But ultimately, if that equipment is ultimately destroyed a week later after it's installed, that remains a problem. And that's been the history of the last.
Wait, that last part. Hang on. You're saying that we're in talks, again, nearly at the completion of the 4-year mark, for something to help them defend their grid, which you also acknowledge has been degraded year after year, getting worse. And then you acknowledge that what we have given them is destroyed like a week later. So in that regard, why in the hell would you want to keep doing what is clearly not working?
What astonishes me, and I wanted to get your insight on this, Dan, if I may, is that any tanks, for instance, I think the era of the man tank is over. I think the era of the A-10 and the Frogfoot, the Su-25, is over. I think the era of manned combat aircraft is over. We're late to the game in seeing that. But any tanks, for instance, that were sent, Leopards, Challengers, Abrams, that were sent to the eastern third of the Ukraine would be scrapped in 72 hours, because the Russian strike fire reconnaissance complex, I will tell you, is the most lethal fire synchronization system that any peer combatant has on planet Earth now, in that we have nothing close to it in the American armed forces by any stretch, whether that's a single service or through joint fires. And I'm also astonished, Dan, and this is where I want to get your insight. How could it be wise for us to take IAMD as integrated air missile defense, which would be effectors and sensors? How is it wise to take Patriots, THAADs, and all of these other very sophisticated and expensive singleton missile systems that we have and bring them over there and use them and see them knocked out consistently and playing chess with the Russians? Whatever you think of them, they're sophisticated note takers. They're sophisticated about their AARs, their after action reports. They're sophisticated in observing things and sort of rewiring or recoding how they do their business and how they conduct their business. What we've given them is we've taken all of our best and most pristine peer sensors and effectors, in this case missiles, if we're just speaking to that, and we've shown them how they work. We've shown them what the what the shortfalls are, what the advantages are that we have, what the disadvantages are. I'm convinced, for instance, again, I don't have evidence to support this. This is sheer speculation. When the Iranians hit the Israelis, I think it was last year, with the first missile barrage, I think the Iranian generals and supervisors went to all of their ammunition supply points that held their palletized missiles and said, I need your oldest lot numbers, because I don't need anything to hit Israeli soil. This will be a reconnaissance by fire, so that we will lob missiles into Israel proper over major cities. We're going to sit back, surveil, and take notes on what their reaction times are, what they're employing, what their kinetic magazine structure is, how they're resupplying, all of that. I'm convinced that the Iranians did that. I'm also convinced that the Russians do the very same thing. But I wanted to get your insight on what you think about America taking all of its pristine and very august, exquisite platforms and showing the Russians how they work.
Yeah, no, I've actually made comment on that many times over the year, that that was a big disaster, because we've literally just given them a laboratory with all of the relevant conditions necessary for them to figure out how to either distract, defeat, or mitigate the effects of it. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that. Big fan of that observation. I'm not a big fan of the fact that we've done it. In fact, I thought it was a big disaster, but it also shows I guess the weakness in our mentality, because we aren't mentally prepared for the rapidity with which you have to think and react and change and adjust in modern combat. We're back still in 1991 when I went to Desert Storm, or maybe 2003 in Iraq, going to Baghdad and all that kind of stuff, where the enemy doesn't have that kind of ability, and we just continued on. Gary also said I'm getting a really bad echo. Can you do anything with that? I'm not sure what happened. But Gary, also, do you have that fog video? Okay. You mentioned something about tanks. I do have a view on that. I don't think that they have gone the way of the dinosaur. I just think they have changed. And okay, very good. I got that. So, and I'd like your view on this here. But what I have seen and talked to many Russians just recently, actually, is that they say, no, the tanks are still there. They're still out there. They're still helpful. But now then they're basically relegated to fire support capability to try to go into these barricades that the enemy has, et cetera, and they can be used to support other things like this. But this is what they're using in the main areas, where it's like, look, it's just trucks sometimes, it's motorcycles, it's whatever works with all the sensors and things that are out there. So there's still a combination of things, but this is actually what I meant a minute ago with the mentality. You've got to have the flexibility of mind to be able to see, well, if this thing doesn't work, if this stuff we planned on doesn't work, we got to figure out what will. And if that's just a freaking truck and a car with no doors, then so be it. If it's a motorcycle, if it's small groups of 2 and 3, we'll do what it takes to succeed. And I don't know that we're as nimble of mind as that. What do you think?
Oh man, we are not nimble. I mean, I'm fond of saying, Dan, that we have the finest and most expensive 20th century pure combat military on earth that is not fit for purpose for 21st century pure combat. Not only in the first quarter century of this new millennium have we had tremendous difficulty fighting irregular warfare, which is my specialty from a military conflict perspective. But even when we look at what we have available to us to conduct pure combat in this century, you can look at aircraft carriers, which I really have a bone in my teeth about, because I think that all they are is future fish apartments, and we need to get rid of them and decommission them tomorrow morning if possible. But you look at tanks, you look at aircraft, you look at our ICBMs, our IRBMs. There is not a single weapon system that we have, apart from our leg infantry and mechanized infantry modalities, the Bradley being accepted, because I think that's a tremendous hunk of junk. But nonetheless, we spend so much money on the most expensive military paper tiger in the history of wars on Earth, and here we are. I mean, we're in a terrible way spending nearly $1 trillion a year if you include the DOE cutouts for nuclear weapons and things like that. $1 trillion a year. I don't think we're getting a return on investment, Dan.
Oh, I definitely don't either. I have we voiced concerns on that on this channel quite a bit. I also want to run back here to the Middle East, because we've painted a picture here where the U.S. administration is just completely detected or disenfranchised from the reality. We just don't seem to recognize it, and we're still going on trying to just make whatever we wanted to do work inside. We're not the only ones, unfortunately, on our side of the ledger. And we're going to go not just to the administration, but in a minute going to go to the U.S. Senate, which is going to have some special place in the Hall of Shame. But first of all, let's go to one of the senior guys in the Hall of Shame, Volodymyr Zelensky.
Good American afternoon and evening, or you have morning.
American morning.
We're morning.
Morning. We are thankful for your bipartisan support. We are thankful, United States, your nation. We are thankful to President Trump and for some initiatives which we will discuss today. And thank you so much for all this period that you are with us. And of course, we are thankful for last sanctions package of President. It was important for us about energy, Russian energy, and I hope it will work, and I hope it will give us a really possibility instrument for pressure on Russia.
So he is all smiles, no matter how bad things. And I just talked to you at the opening of this about how bad things are on the front line, how bad things are in the air. Rubio himself talked about they're lucky if they get 50% of the time they even have electricity, gas, running water, etc. That's how bad things are. And yet he's all smiles about, yay, I'm going to get another package from the United States. What do you make of that?
So I think it's part of money laundering. I am convinced that kompromat, which is a Russian term for compromised material on people, that the West has used that for not only a lot of, maybe it's domestic politicos, and the evidence is out there if one would dig around, but when it comes to foreign entities that are friendly or neutral to the United States, in this case, the Ukraine, Zelensky, I mean, here's a guy who a mere 10 years ago was playing a piano with his penis. I mean, this is a man, I'm sorry to be crude when I say that, but this is a man who is not up to the task. He's playing at this, but then again, there's a certain thespian component to being a politician, and I get that. Winston Churchill would be a great example of that, a great exemplar of that. But making these kind of friends and allies are ones that we can do without. But then I also view this, Dan, from a non-interventionist lens, not an isolationist lens, but non-interventionist, because I want to have commerce with the world. I simply don't want to export violence abroad when I don't have to. But I just find we make friends with the worst people. I mean, did we not just have a meeting with a head chopper in the awful office? I call it the awful, which is OFFAL or AWFUL, however you select it. We just had a Syrian head chopper who was a member of Al-Qaeda come, and he's greeted to much fanfare in the awful office. We choose the worst people. We have had a relationship with Al-Qaeda, again, I alluded to it earlier, since the 1980s. We helped form Al-Qaeda. It was Congressman Wilson who started arming the Mujahideen with Stinger missiles and things like that. It helped to establish Al-Qaeda, and then in the 1990s, of course, Al-Qaeda starts to turn around. But then again, we can fast forward to Libya. Everybody is familiar with Benghazi. What was the ambassador doing? He was going there either to retrieve Stinger missiles or to give munitions to AQ affiliates in the area. We aligned ourselves with AQ affiliates in Syria. And to a certain extent, ISIS was a creation of bad intelligence activities by the CIA and other bad actors there. So I'm always aghast at who we make friends with overseas.
And is there any kind of an end to this? I mean, I guess there eventually will be. I mean, I remember, maybe you can talk a little bit about this if you have studied this, back during the Vietnam War, when we were really good friends with the president of South Vietnam until we weren't. And then we kind of either turned a blind eye, or some say we even helped a coup that ended up having him killed. Then yes, somebody else stepped in there. So how does that kind of transition happen? And do you see any possibility of that in this case?
I certainly do. I mean, can Zelensky be assassinated tomorrow morning? I happen to think the Russians have not done that because he's such a convenient stooge for them, because I think the Russians are very savvy when it comes to external espionage, human intelligence, and that kind of thing. The possibility is certainly there, but who's waiting in the wings to take his place? Another bad actor. I mean, I am hard-pressed to look at allies that we've had since the end of World War II in August 1945, who are not only not so credible partners of the United States, but have not been manipulated by the United States for what the deep state and the intelligence community thinks is best for us. And unfortunately, I think, Dan, that for the most part, I was amused by what you said about anti-war and rational war. We can tease that out some other time, but yeah. War is the business of America since 1871. In 1871, there was a failed coup attempt by the Americans in Korea. Didn't go so well. Came back home. And then in the 1880s, we take over the Hawaiian Islands. And then in the 1890s, Spanish-American War. All of a sudden, we find ourselves with colonial possessions in the Pacific and in the Caribbean. Fast forward to 1914, Wilson gets in. He promises, oh no, America won't get involved in another European war. Well, he gets involved in it. As a result of 1917 and 1918, I'm amused by this time cop story where a time cop goes back and, Dan, let's suppose you send me back in time and you say, I need you to murder Adolf Hitler as a baby, as a child, whatever the case may be. I return and you say, how did it go? And I say, you know, Chief, I didn't get that guy, but I did manage to murder Woodrow Wilson. But I didn't get to Adolf Hitler. And you go, Adolf who? Because Wilson was patient zero for Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler is patient zero for World War II. World War II is patient zero for decolonization and the deracinization, the decomposition of the European colonial complex, whether it's Portugal, France, England, and all the others with their holdings in Africa and Asia. And all of a sudden, all of these intrastate wars, civil wars, and interstate wars start to really multiply around the world because they have been released and loosed from their colonial tethers to start doing that. Because one of my watchwords is that when I observe conflict history, and I know you're a reader of military history just like me, is that civil wars usually erupt as a result of larger wars that have been there that breathe oxygen into the embers of long dormant conflict. World War I did that, World War II did that, and of course World War II led directly to French invasions of Indochina and Algeria, which was considered a part of metropolitan France. Of course, we inherit that in Vietnam, but when you look at America, and I cover this in detail in Trail of Tears, that course that I did for Scott, is that we haven't won a military conflict since 1945. And some will say, well, what about the Brilliant Campaign in 1991 in the Gulf War? Well, if that had been one, we wouldn't have returned in 2003 now, would we? But mind you, I want to put this little, this little, I guess, observation that I liked the fact that in that war it had very limited mission objectives, and we simply stopped. I thought it was so sober the way the Persian Gulf War was conducted, even though I think its origins were urged on, like what Ambassador Glaspie did when she sort of gave a wink and a nod to the Iraqis to invade Kuwait, and Scott Horton talks about that in great detail. But then we fast forward now, there's no conflict that American armed forces, whether in a regular or conventional conflict, has won. Recently, if we fast forward now to what's happening off of Yemen, not only have we lost over 24 Predators, which are very large and expensive UASs by the Yemenis, which arguably is a third world country, but they have run those aircraft carriers out of those narrow bottoms of the Red Sea because they're running scared. Even though I've never been a carrier admiral, nor do I play one on TV. You would never find me bringing a carrier into a narrow seascape like the Red Sea. I don't understand why we do that, but there it is. But so when you look at between 1945 and 2025, you ask yourself, we've been spending trillions of dollars on this enormous military complex festooned with exquisite platforms, and we always come up with zero when it comes to stalemate, when it comes to victory. We don't.
When it comes to victory and when it comes to positive outcomes, but man, does it keep the gravy train rolling. And that, that seems to be
But you know, my son,
objective.
I have 3 sons, 2 daughters, and 7 grandchildren. And I just discovered yesterday my 8th grandchild is on the way. When I was in Afghanistan, my sons would ask me, hey, Dad, so what are you doing over there? I tell them what I was doing. And they say, so when you look at the war overall, what do you think? And I say, it's a very sophisticated money laundering operation for the military-industrial complex.
Hard to argue with the assessment there, but we'll have to leave it there for the time being. Listen, we really appreciate you coming on. I'm glad we got some of our technical issues solved, and look forward to having you back on next soon, because there's a lot of things we need to keep talking about there. And I look forward to getting into some of that stuff with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dan. It was an honor to be on your show, and I love what you do, and keep doing what you do.
Thank you very much, and we'll keep doing it with you. But in the meantime, we're going to move right on next to Larry Johnson, former CIA analyst, coming up literally in just 7 or 8 minutes from now at noon. He's going to be coming to us actually from not far from where I am right now. It's elsewhere here in the D.C. area. He's going to be getting on a plane later on, but he has graciously decided and allowed us to have a show with him from his hotel suite is where I believe he's going to be coming from. You're not going to want to miss some of the stuff he's got to say. And I actually had dinner with him last night. Looking forward to talk to you about that coming up soon in about 7 minutes from now. Larry Johnson on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive. See you in a minute.